This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. That 6 degrees of separation concept, it seems to be my life these days. One Sunday afternoon, I'm in Saigon, Vietnam. A few hours later, I'm still in Saigon, Vietnam, but now I'm in the front row of a presentation that Richard Branson of Virgin fame is giving. My life, completely unexpected. So while I randomly ended up at this event backstage, I was introduced to an individual, my guest today, Joey Yap. Joey is the founder of the Master Academy of Chinese Metaphysics. That is his specialty, Chinese metaphysics. That would be Feng Shui, Qi, these very interesting concepts that many of us in the West are not familiar with, or at least not familiar with to the depth that you will see in Chinese culture. A wide-ranging conversation that I will guarantee you forces you to think about the moment of now, to think about flow, to think about our surroundings and our internal workings. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Joey Yap. Here's how I came to meet you. I have to give a little backstory, and because I want your perspective. I want you to take this little story in and let me know if there's any significance from your perspective. In 2012, I'm doing this podcast. I'm talking about yoga because I've been starting to do yoga. Somebody writes me and they say, "Hey, Mike, I really love that you're talking about yoga. Will you come speak for me, a bank in Japan?" That turns into a 4-month speaking tour. In the middle of that speaking tour, I guess I was friends with him already, but I had not met him. Fabian Lim, a friend of yours, a friend of mine now. Fabian writes me and he says, "Hey, I see you're going to be in Singapore. Let's hang out." I become friends with Fabian. We continue to bump into each other over the next couple years while I'm in and out of Asia. And then lo and behold, a couple weeks ago, I'm just kind of hanging out on a Sunday and Fabian says, "Hey, I'm in town. I'm going to this event." I did not know he was a speaker. He says, come on by. And he takes me in a back door. I end up meeting you. Roll forward a few hours from there. I'm sitting at one of Saigon's nicest sushi restaurants, and we're sitting side by side. And you look at me very honestly and you say, "Hey, Mike, I really don't know anything about investing or trading." Now, I thought that was unusual because I know, even though I didn't know your background at that moment, I knew there was some accomplishment. Okay. So you're being very direct and very honest. "Hey, I don't know." But I looked at you and I said, "Hey, if you understand the moment of now, you're 10 light years ahead of most people." Before we even jump into anything, though, what I'm really curious about is that connective tissue. From me being in San Diego, doing a podcast, talking about yoga, I can literally see all of the steps that took place, all of the connections that had to happen for me to get to the point to talk to you today. Now, I could just say, "Hey, that's coincidence, that's fortuitous, it's a little bit of luck." How do you perceive that little story when you hear it for the first time?
It's what we call in Chinese metaphysics, meaningful coincidence. Every point has a specific meaning and specific energy patterns that connect us to. And so when, I have my destiny chart and you have your destiny chart, and so there's a point where we actually connect, and then we might share a journey together, or we might share a story together. So those points are very important, and that's what we actually look at when we are studying someone's destiny chart. Most people think that astrology is about predicting the future, but we can't predict the future. We can only see some patterns. And so from these patterns, we try to anticipate what sort of connection that we will have. And if your chart and my chart, the frequency is right, we will it's like a magnet. We will pull to each other. We'll connect in somehow.
Let me unpack this some, because I was giving this kind of crazy random story just to get your perspective. But I want to unpack your world now, and I want to kind of dive deep, because You're a guy in your early 30s. You're quite successful. I really look at you as a self-made entrepreneur. You've made your first million by 26. I mean, it's the kind of thing that people dream about. But as a young guy, so take me back to you as a guy who's 10, 12 years old, living in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. What were you like at that age?
At the time, I was searching for myself. I think that would be the right description. I wasn't a person that stand out in the crowd. So I wanted to know what I could do. I thought that, there must be something in this life that I'm meant to do. And I was looking for answers. And like most people, that needed answers, what piqued my interest is that this concept of destiny or fortune telling. At that time, it's known as fortune telling. And so I went around looking at the some of these old masters, and I gave them my date of birth, or I showed them a palm, and they started reading stuff. Some were pretty good. They could describe my character, my personality. Some of the things that they say amazes me, but a lot of what they say also puts me, sort of disappointed me, because they told me based on destiny, I will never be rich. That's the first thing that keeps coming back from various practitioners. Now, part of me said, I want to know how they derive this answer. How did they get to this answer? And that sort of pushed me into studying this art. Then I realized after, much research, talking to different people, different masters, and after spending lots of money and time, I discovered that what they did was they tried to anticipate an outcome based on my character, based on my personality traits at that time. But they also see another thing is that they thought that circumstances determine the man. And so they look at my circumstances, which based on the chart wasn't too pleasant. There are lots of issues and obstructions. So they thought, someone with this sort of circumstances and events in their life probably won't make it. So they sort of foretold my future that it wouldn't be good. Because of what they said, it caused me to go and study this, and I found one thing, if you like your so-called future, just go ahead with it. If you don't like that direction, just turn the other way. So I tried this concept, I tried this principle, and I tried, let's do it the other way. The element that is strongest in my chart, the most dominant force, why don't I just let go with the flow and see what happens, even though they say they're challenging. And so when I did that, I find that yes, it is indeed challenging, but I found that there are actually loopholes in this. There are certain points where if you make decisions based on a good list of options that you see, and you choose the best option available, by adding up all together, you actually lead to a better outcome. The whole idea of destiny at that time, from the self-discovery part, that I discovered that, you can actually change the direction, although we all end up at the same destination, which is, we are born, and then the end final destination is we're going to die someday. But in between, there are many routes to lead to the end. Some routes are more scenic and beautiful, which if you decide on choosing those routes, you actually have a better life. So for me, the way I look at meaningful coincidences, sometimes you get the signal, sometimes you get these points in life where if you make certain decisions, and based on the options that are available from what your chart has, the outcome can be quite pleasant.
Let me let you explain big picture a little bit, and then I'm going to bring it back to your starting out too, because I want the audience to kind of follow along. Look, I've got an international audience that listens, and I'm sure people are going to have their preconceived ideas when they hear phrases like metaphysics, Feng Shui. I have my preconceived ideas. I by no means am an expert or frankly even that knowledgeable. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on. But so why don't you go ahead and give some big picture thought process here to Chinese metaphysics, to Feng Shui, and to the idea that I'm sure somebody in my audience right now who is very successful is thinking, oh my gosh, Mike Coveel has got a Chinese fortune teller on his show. He's lost his mind. Joey, unpack it all.
Let me bring you from the start, okay? Chinese metaphysics basically encompasses maybe unconventional studies about how the environmental energies of vibration affects our lives. And there are three categories of energy that affects our lives, how our lives unfold. We call this heaven, earth, man, the three factors. When we say heavenly factors, it involves things that are beyond our control, such as the economy, the market, basically circumstances that happens around us. That we term this heaven factors. Okay. And then there are earthly matters. Earthly matters involves our environment. Sometimes there are environmental changes, the place we live, the place we spend a lot of time, the place we work, the people we are with. Those are our environment. When we change our environment, we can also change our lives. The third factor is called the man factor, or the people factor, meaning who we are, our character, our personality, our willpower, our decisions that we make. So there are three factors that generally decide the outcome of our life. So then the tools used to measure these three things are Feng Shui, which measures earthly matters, our environment, the place we live, the place we work. That's called Feng Shui. It's just a tool. And the tool to measure the heavenly matters are called 八字, or Chinese astrology. Stuff that probably a lot of people in the West know about is the Chinese horoscopes, the animal signs, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. They just use those terms to represent time and the mapping of time to track those matters that affect us. Of course, lastly, there are man factors, which means our virtues, our behavior, and then you have the whole philosophy from people like Confucius or Lao Tzu. These are the ancient sages that a whole list of how you should behave and how you should do good, and basically it's positive thinking and positive behavior. And today, some people call that a tool like NLP, for example. Those are part of man factors. So when we hear Feng Shui, it is a tool that the practitioners use to measure or assess how the environment affects us. Some environment, when we go into that place, we feel better, we are happier, we feel that we belong, our energy level is higher. I give you an explanation of how this works in a corporate environment, because I do a lot of Feng Shui consulting for corporations here in Malaysia and Singapore. And so, a lot of people think that, so we do this Feng Shui and it's supposed to be magic happen and everyone does well. It's not like that. Now, let's use an example of hiring, okay? A lot of organizations will hire the employees, new staff that comes to work with them, and it will be based on the skill set they supposedly have. So they would have like a degree, for example, or a diploma or some special skills. So it's based on the skill sets, you hire someone. Now, when this new employee comes into the organization, sometimes, in fact, a lot of times you feel that after 30 days, 60 days, or maybe up to 90 days, they will leave the organization. Now, why would they leave? Of course, you may say, well, they leave because, well, the tasks from their superiors are not very clear. They don't know what tasks, because skills are supposed to be used to perform a task, right? Now, even if they're performing the right tasks, after 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, this employee might still leave the company. Now, why? Maybe you may say it's the objectives. The company, the management hasn't got clear objectives, because objectives determine the tasks and tasks determine what skills are needed to perform the task. But let's say now the management has the correct objectives from the start. Some employees still leave after 30 days or 60 days or even 90 days. Why? Because there's an invisible force that affects the way people work in an organization, or whether they want to stay or go. And that invisible force in corporate terms is called corporate culture. But corporate culture is a feeling, or some sort of an energy field that is there, and it's usually caused or determined by the leaders in the company. Now, where Feng Shui works, or environmental science such as Feng Shui works, is that it affects the way people behave or feel in an organization. So when we say we implement Feng Shui, we are generally trying to implement the vibrations, the energy level, and hopefully affecting that people have a good culture, good environment to work with. And if they work in an environment that is positive, they perform better and ultimately lead to improvements. So that's generally how Feng Shui is done. Okay, what is different and wrongly perceived in the West is that when they talk about Feng Shui, they think it is the objects that they put in the office. It's like the wind chimes and mirrors and stuff they put around their house. It's nothing to do with the objects. Objects are made of plastic. They are made of some items that does not produce any chi from the natural environment. We are talking about how the environment which is Mother Nature, affects the property. We're not talking about man-made objects that is inside the home. The problem is the idea of Feng Shui has been sort of bastardized in the West, and so that they could sell trinkets. And that's what happened when people talk about Feng Shui. They think, oh, I want to talk about this stuff. It's not. It's about how your environment supports you.
Let me interject one thing right there. You said something that I'm sure for some people passed right over, which is qi. Why don't you talk about qi for a moment and give the audience some big picture there as well?
So the underlying principle of all Chinese metaphysics or life itself is the energy or the hidden unseen vibration. That's what we call qi in Chinese metaphysics. It's type of energy now. I think the closest we could find with qi is life force energy. And life force energy is divided to internal and external. Internal is the one that gives life force to you and that you could enhance physically through the practice of Tai Chi or yoga. And I believe you have started with that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so when you practice yoga or you practice Tai Chi, which is a Chinese form of exercise to produce or enhance your Qi internally, you feel better, you feel more vibrant, you feel energetic, your health improves, you think better. When you practice meditation, you focus your mind, you focus your Qi into enhancing and circulating and causing your life force to be stronger. When you practice Feng Shui is the study of the environment's Qi, the externally that is produced by Mother Nature itself. So it is a form of vibration. It is the same vibration that exists in external and internal. So we call it yin and yang. That's how the concept comes about.
Joey, let me also get you to elaborate on something, because you were making some comments about perhaps many in the West and their understanding of Chinese metaphysics, Feng Shui, etc. Why don't you talk for a moment from your perspective a little bit more about the cultural chasm? Because I think for many in the West still, even though you're in Malaysia, Chinese ancestry, China is still this mythical, I mean, I've been a bunch to mainland China, but it's still this mythical thought. It's this huge place of this huge number of people. In America, for example, it's still positioned as, the Red Chinese, we're going to have a war soon. It's all this stuff. But once you get under the covers, so to speak, we're all people, but with significant cultural differences, even though once you start to understand those cultural differences, maybe we're still the same, but the culture is definitely a chasm.
Yes. The cultural difference is generally that the Chinese principles of Confucianism, it started off with the theory of the Tao, so the background was a little bit different. It's supposed to be about balance, about being united with nature, heaven, earth, and man, the three factors that I told you about. So that's the basic underlying principle. However, when Feng Shui or Chinese metaphysics reaches the West, it's sort of gone through a lot of, it became fast food, So I think the perception is a little bit different, because when I speak to the American audience about Feng Shui, they think that I'm trying to teach them how to decorate their home.
Hey, look, I laugh. That's probably what I would think if I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah. So, but that's the idea that they have. They think that, oh, you're going to tell me what paintings I should have in the wall. Now, I can't blame them for that. It's because part of the Chinese culture, who right now is that, if anything makes money, they're going to turn it into a business. So if the Americans or anyone else in the West love these Chinese trinkets, we're going to sell them and we're going to brand them under Feng Shui. And that's how the whole business of trinket selling came about. But in reality, if you look at the real substance, the core principles of Feng Shui is nothing more than understanding your environment.
I was going through your Twitter feed and I just love so many, and I brought up the cultural thing because I think sometimes we are saying the same thing on each side of the planet, but sometimes using different words. And I, for example, I saw something most recently on your Twitter. You said there's two kinds of people who make things complex and people who simplify. Look, in my world, the traders that simplify are the traders that are the most successful. The ones that get all complex are the ones that you always sit on pins and needles waiting for them to blow up because they've made their life so complex.
Isn't that true? Isn't that true?
It's the same stuff. We just come at it with perhaps different terminology, different definitions, etc.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Let me get you to go back, though, because I started asking you about your early life, because I'm going to bring it back to the metaphysics. But you're also, I think there's a cool part of this story of the inspirational, which is a young guy, teenager, deciding you are going to go in a certain path. You get the requisite accounting degree. For those in the West that have never been to KL, this is a very modern city. The Petronas Tower is one of the coolest buildings in the world. Talk about the notion of when did you make the decision? How did you make the decision to go entrepreneurial? Because when you made that decision to go entrepreneurial as a young man, roll forward 12, 14 years, you're meeting Richard Branson. That's a cool story.
What Richard Branson said at the time when we met him, he said that a lot of his businesses came out of frustration. And when I think back then, in my early days when I first started, when you first started when I first started on a subject, I learned everything there is about the subject. I buy all the books, I see all the so-called top people in the field, I interview a lot of them, I want to study with them. And I find that then there's a difference between, classical Feng Shui, that means the real stuff, and then there is the new age stuff that I see. And out of frustration, I wanted to tell the world, hey, you guys, this is how you do stuff. I think a little bit like how you write your book and how you simplify the whole concept, and so that people could see patterns and trends. I would like people to, at that time, to learn about this stuff, the real thing. Okay, so that is my motive behind doing this. I didn't start off deciding to be an entrepreneur, but I needed to be one in order to have the business to pursue this dream. Now, what caused me to do this is back when I was 18 years old, when I was doing this Feng Shui. At that time, it was about during the crisis in the Asian crisis. At the time, I still remember the days when we were when I was in Australia, when the Asian crisis hit. Those days we don't have Skype like this. We in order to wait for your family to call, you had to wait by the phone because the phone calls are expensive. I still remember some of my friends at that time. They some have to stop studying. They have to go home because there's not enough money. And so I decided at the time that, I have a skill. I learned this when I was 15. And at this age, I could actually do some readings for people. And so happened that I managed to get some clients who wanted astrology readings, and they didn't mind that I was a young kid just starting out. And they enjoyed it. They recommended their friends. And that's how my so-called consulting business began. Now, when I came home from Australia, I made pretty decent money at that time doing what I love. I thought this is great. And I studied accounting. So when I came back to Malaysia and I told my dad, my dad said, hey, you got to start your career now because your siblings are still young. They need to study and you better help out. I told him, I just need 6 months to, just to enjoy and relax. I'll get a job when after this 6 months. I'll be the accountant that you want to be after 6 months. But give me 6 months to work this out. So in that 6 months, I sort of pursued doing the consulting work in Feng Shui and parts because I really love to do that. And I got 6 months to prove that I can survive on my own. Otherwise, I have to be an accountant.
That's depressing.
That to me, that's not what I like to do. So in order to avoid that, I started consulting. But the problem at that time is I was, in this field is generally dominated by people who are old. I think the general stereotypical image of a practitioner in this field is someone old with a beard, It was challenging for me. And that time, and this happened, and a lot of meaningful coincidence happened. You see, I went back to my college owner, right, from Malaysia. And the reason I know him is because when I was studying in his college before I went to Australia, is that I organized a party like a college ball. I organized that event and I got to know him because I organized this event. I invited him to this event because we didn't have enough sponsors to do this event. So I wanted the management to come, So that's how I know him. When I came back from university, I actually failed like 3 subjects, okay? Now, I failed 3 subjects because I was busy doing Feng Shui and I didn't have time to go and study my real education. So I had to go and talk to this guy because he's the owner of the college, that he could talk to the university that I studied in and bring the summer paper back to Malaysia. So I don't have to fly back and do another semester. It's basically just cannot afford to do another semester. It's too expensive during the economic crisis. And that's how I know this guy. And today he's a billionaire. He's a very good friend of mine, but he's really low profile. He said to me, what did you do in Australia? I said, no, I didn't really study. I sort of flunked the subjects. And can you help me out here by bringing this subject over? And I told him that his dean, the dean of the university that I was in, the dean told me that I was wasting my time doing this. And I told him I feel really sorry for that. And he said, don't feel sorry. And this is my turning point, because this guy, he told me that since he was 18 years old, he already had a Feng Shui master take care of all his business dealings until today. And I said, oh, but your dean told me that I was wasting my time. Then this guy told me, well, that's why he's still working for me. That changed my perspective on my decision to pursue this further. And he's the one who told me you should pursue your dreams. If you like this, then you should pursue it.
Here you are with a Western influence, also having spent time in Australia, but then you come back and you're essentially talking to a tycoon in Malaysia, and this very accomplished man is showing you that he has belief in these principles and these thought processes, and so at that moment you're saying, wow, this is given Chinese culture across Asia, this has a deep meaning to many people.
It has deep meaning to me, and at that moment I knew why I had to fail that subject, just to see him. You see, and he's the one that told me this, that I should pursue this path, because all the rich friends he knows in Asia uses Feng Shui. He said that to me. I said, oh, I didn't know that. Then I said, but I'm only, I'm so young, and why would they listen to me? And here's the most important thing he said to me. He said, that is why you need to be living proof of Feng Shui. You need to be successful. If you are successful, people will listen to you. He said that this thing to me. Then that's the point. I said, okay, so now if I say that all this Feng Shui is supposed to work, then I need to help myself first. So that meeting with him changed my life.
I'll share back with you in my mid-20s, I had something similar happen. And I remember I had read Anthony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power. I didn't take a tremendous amount from it, but there was one very key thing in there that did change my life. And the idea was that if you wanted to have the success of somebody you might read about, et cetera, get close to them and learn. I mean, don't just get really close. And here you are. And I did the same thing with traders. I would go literally knock on the door of people that you were reading in the newspapers. And essentially you had the same experience, is that you were very close to someone that had that success. And that does something to you differently than just only reading about it, doesn't it?
It does, because I get to see and to understand how they actually put their principles and their beliefs and the methods they run the business to work. At that point, I thought, actually all these things that lead me to this point has meaning. That's how it all started. And so I worked very hard on myself. I practiced all the Feng Shui formulas that I knew at the time, and it was very complex. And then when I see this guy again, I said, all this stuff about this formula. Then he told me this: business people have no time. Simplify it.
Let me bring it back to some detail too. So I don't want to say it wrong, because hold on, let me make sure. Well, I guess you pronounce chi, even though it's spelled QI, it's pronounced chi. Yes,
pronounced chi. That's correct.
Expand on that somewhat. The notion of flow. I mean, I don't necessarily have my own definitions, really. It's more instinctive, but I think quite a few practitioners over the centuries, over the millennia, have thought about flow in deep ways.
Sometimes at some point when we get into a subject and we are in a point where time simply disappears and we just keep writing and writing and writing, the ideas just keep coming to us. That state itself is what we call when we're in flow, when there's chi. So the idea is to get into that mode. So if we can have the environment support us, some people need the environment. So they would travel to certain places, they would go to a different state, or go to the mountains, or go to the beach side, or change their state, or go to a different country. They need to be in a place that gives them the maximum flow. That is generally what flow is about from the external. And if we can align our internal flow as well, we can be in better state of mind or condition to produce maximum results. That is generally what the Feng Shui it's about, by getting the qi to its optimal level.
And there's bad qi too, right?
Of course, there's bad qi, and we can also be in an environment where we're affected, and we feel more negative. At the end of the day, how do we communicate with our subconscious mind? We communicate through feelings. We can say as many positive things as we want to say, but if we feel negative, the end result is still negative.
Talk about the notion of bad qi being contagious.
Oh yeah, you see, the thing is, because qi communicates internally through how you feel. And normally, the way I see how a person communicates, because I have friends who probably don't speak English or even Chinese or any language that well, but they can communicate effectively because I believe it's a transfer of feelings. As long as you could transfer the feeling to somebody, you're communicating. And in metaphysical terms, you're transferring the qi. And so if someone is negative, they transfer the qi to you, you will feel depressed as well. So sometimes people can just brighten up the room just by leaving. So they just have that energy with them that you feel gloomy just looking at them. So we want to be someone, I feel that, we want to be someone that brings happiness to other people, that when people see us, they feel good. They have that vibration.
You personally, I will have to say, I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, and I can't give this description to the audience, but I think in talking with you, you are very optimistic and, full of energy. And I think for me, I'll always remember just how direct you were. Again, as I said this earlier in the podcast, you're very accomplished, but you said, I don't know anything about that. And there was like complete confidence to say, I don't know anything about that. So many people go through life faking it and pretending they know something, and they're afraid to say, I don't know.
I think the hardest word to say is not I love you, it's more like I don't know, And sometimes I feel that way, yeah. But, I didn't really felt that what I said was that significant even at the time. But if it's a subject I don't know, I cannot fake it,
Let me go back to the event, though. So we meet at this Richard Branson event. I really didn't define this at the beginning of the podcast, and that's where Fabian Lim was speaking. You were speaking. I meet you guys backstage. I just randomly end up in the first row to watch Richard Branson speak in Saigon, Vietnam. This is my crazy life, too. Talk to me, because I think had you had some prior experience of Branson. I would love for you to take a little time and give me your perspective on Branson and some of the things that you have observed about him that perhaps even though it's secondhand, sometimes we can pass along experiences about other people. And look, he's made $5 billion. He's done a few things right.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah? Now, my impression of him, prior to this, I had an impression of who he is from reading his stuff, reading his articles or news about him. And also because I read, like everyone in the metaphysical field, we always look at accomplished people and look at their destiny charts. Because we want to find patterns, obviously. We want to find, what's in there that we could see in other people as well. So I generally could gauge his behavior just by looking at his year, month, and day. However, when meeting him, I see something that is different. The way he has activated and used what his so-called God-given chart, it's not what I expected. For instance, I think you remember the point where he said that he started his businesses out of frustrations. And we heard that together, right? And I thought that was quite interesting because most of the entrepreneurs that I know, they do it because they have a vision, they want to add value, they want to create something, and they have this whole idea of how the empire should be. But this guy did it because he saw, he was frustrated with something and he wanted to rectify it, and then he created a successful business around it. So I thought this is a very good approach because that means we don't have to just come up with a brilliant idea. We could fix other ideas and make it better. I thought this was a good approach. For me, it's something new.
To some degree, I'm a little bit like that in the way that I'm not comparing myself to Branson, but comparing myself to the thought process, which is I tend to think that there's not necessarily so many things that are original today that we take a Picasso and we edit the Picasso and we change it, but we're all inspired. And look at your world. You're inspired by all these masters and these brilliant guys going back thousands of years and their wisdom from thousands of years ago. I mean, do you ever imagine the kinds of lives they led, the thinking, how did they put these very strong philosophical and moral principles together that stand the test of time? They did this thousands of years ago.
Yeah, I often think about that, how they actually come up with this stuff. I think, for us who are learning this from for me, they're learning from these ancient sages and teachers. It is also our duty to pass this on and hopefully make a difference as well to other people's lives. I think, I didn't set this whole business up so that we could just go make money. That's not the intention of it. It's a byproduct of what we do. We still need it to fund the entire process, the business itself, because people need to get paid. However, the most important thing is the metaphysics knowledge get passed on. And if someone learns even a bit of this and it changes their lives for the better, then I think I've done my job. Because that is the original, the very reason I started this. It was to do this.
Let me take you back a little bit to just a few more kind of principal points and big picture thoughts. When I was going through your bio and going through everything in advance of talking with you, I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I start? This goes on. This is, I mean, clearly we could go on for hours and hours and hours, but I want to just give people some structure too. Talk about polarity in Feng Shui. Talk about yin and yang theory. I think yin and yang theory would be really interesting for the audience if you kind of explain some.
Oh yeah, there's everything boils down to yin and yang. When we look at yin and yang, probably in the West, they would probably see active and inactive, passive and active. But the way we look at yin and yang, we also look at how the environment itself is divided to yin and yang. Besides light and day and darkness, we also look at mountains and water, which produces different types of qi. For instance, when we are working, we're performing, when we are thinking, when we are talking to people, like doing this interview right now, it's a yang activity. But when we are sleeping, we are recovering, when feelings of love, the feeling of trust, courage and faith, all those are yin activities. So we need to look at features in our environment that support these things. In terms of Feng Shui, we look at two features from our environment. To see if the environment has got positive feature, we normally study what type of land contours are in that vicinity. That's the yin factor. And so the principle says, if the mountains or the contours of the land are vibrant, the people have generally, they are more positive, they have better character, they have stronger attitude, they have more their principle, they have good moral compass. Where the hills and contours of the land are weak or they are not pleasant, you find that people generally don't behave that well. They have not so good moral compass. Maybe they will resort to shortcuts and generally harder to be reasoned with. Water governs connection, okay? Or in a more layman term, in Feng Shui, they say that water governs wealth. But to me, water governs connection. If you're not connected to people and there's flow between your business and the value goes to other people and people give you value, I think there's business to be done. So that's why they say water is the yang component of Feng Shui. So when we study an environment, we are basically looking at the combination between the contours, the hills or the mountains with the water, and where we are positioned in relation to those areas. So you find that areas that are predominantly water are usually financial districts. They usually do business, it's more connected anyway. You see even like New York, it's surrounded by water. You said you have Canary Wharf in London, that's water, So these are areas where the activity is determined generally by the way the formation of the land is, okay? So that's yin and yang for us. Now inside the home, we can also divide the areas into yang areas and yin areas. The living rooms, the entrances, they're all yang, and then the bedrooms, they're all yin features. So how do we ascertain, or how do we know it is in a good area? We will then need to do a calculation, or I'm trying to understand whether that home itself, it's receiving the energy from the external to the internal. And then we have to check, how are the people behaving in that area? Are they doing better? Is their health improving? Do they get sick all the time? So sometimes if the yin feature is off, is not tuned, then people just get sick or they get grumpy all the time and they have relationship issues. So we try to fix those issues. It's a balance of yin and yang. But here's the misconception with this. People think that yin and yang is basically adding some lights in the corner of the room and brightening up certain places. It's not true. Lights or lamps and all that in the house generally don't affect the yin and yang. It's more important where the positioning, the direction where the bedroom is, where they rest. Is it comfortable? Do they receive maximum yin chi so that they can heal? They feel better. They are, they care more about life. They care more about other people. So that sort of environment is what we look for.
I want to share something with you in this headspace of talking about water. When I came, and I've been in Asia primarily for the last 3 years, but when I came, and I think I mentioned this to you, I ended up giving like 50 presentations in a few months. And I was in many of the largest hedge funds and mutual funds across Asia, from Beijing to KL to Singapore, you name it, Tokyo. And one of the things that I had in my presentation, and of course, you're doing the same presentation a lot, but one of the things I had in my presentation was a video clip from Bruce Lee, the Be Like Water video clip. And the funny thing about that is I had it in my presentation. Even in the West, I was using it. I had it in my presentation because it made a connection to the trading principles for me. What I did not realize in coming to Asia is that when I started to play that clip, I could have a room full of people that are half asleep. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they're like, who is this white guy? Will he please be quiet? But when I would turn on that Bruce Lee clip, I'm telling you what, talk about winning audiences. The white guy is playing the Bruce Lee clip. The whole room would smile, and it was good.
Wow.
It was so cool. And I stumbled into that. I did not plan that,
You were in tune, I tell you. You're in tune. That's great.
And it's really fascinating because we've really just scratched the surface today. I mean, we're just giving people touch tones where they can kind of reach out and dig for more. And I'm sure I still have some people that are thinking in the back of their mind, Mike, you did not press Joey enough about the fortune telling aspect. But then again, maybe they're missing the big picture of what we're even talking about. People are always going to have their ideas and always have their thought processes. Joey, where's the best place we can send people besides joeyyap.com? That's probably the best place to start, right?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. I do have some books if they are interested in understanding the subject about destiny a little bit more. I've written a book called The Destiny Code. It's not fortune telling as I would explain in this book, but it does explain what we're born with, the energy patterns that we're born with, and how do we maximize it. It's about understanding our own life patterns. Everyone has a life story. What's our plot in our story? Who are the main characters in our story? Who can we look for? And what can we do to become better?
What I love about this subject too is that unlike perhaps traditional religions, this is not a religion. This is kind of a perspective of trying to understand self, understand environment, understand, as you say, the heavens, the things we can't control. And that's quite a different perspective to me, at least, because there's no central figure that one is trying to look up to. It's more just trying to understand.
It's all about the self, yes. It's all about the self and understanding the self and becoming better.
Hey, thank you for taking the time. You're in KL today, yeah?
Yes, I am.
You are on the road a lot. Where are you headed to next? Where will you?
I will be in Taiwan tomorrow.
Taiwan.
So yeah, I'm gonna look at some land in Taiwan. So that's for a Feng Shui consult.
Okay. Well, cool. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Sure. Thank you so much.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.